I love truffles because of that aroma profile. The thing that I look forward to every year is opening the fridge door when I've got some truffle in the fridge, because the aroma just wafts out of the fridge, and that's an aroma that I'd kill for.
This is The Producers. I'm Dani Valent. Nigel Wood grows truffles at Truffle Paddock, a small farm outside Melbourne where 600 trees coax tuber melanosporum into existence. He also sources truffles to make products, including truffle honey and truffle salt, and is the founder of the Truffle Melbourne Festival. When Nigel bought his farm, he thought he might grow grapes for wine, but the aroma, flavour and romance of truffles hooked him in, and he became a pioneer in an Australian industry that's grown exponentially in the past 20 years.
So my name's Nigel Wood, and my truffle farm is called Truffle Paddock. Hello. The farm is about an hour and a half out of Melbourne, towards Phillip Island, just out of a little town called Grantville. It's rolling hillside. A lot of it was cleared 120 years ago, so it's the sort of bald hills of southwest Gippsland. That forest was basically shipped out of Grantville and came up to Melbourne and became foundation timber for a lot of the buildings that were built in the late 1800s in Melbourne. So it's cleared land. It's quite close to the coast. We're about 2 hills from the coast. So our climate is a little bit moderated by being so close to the sea. So we don't get quite as cold as I'd like ideally sometimes on those cooler evenings, just because of that climate moderation. But we've still had lots of 8 degrees, 6 degrees evenings, and that's what we really need for ripening the truffle. And we first hunted a couple of weeks ago, on the 28th of May. We found half a kilo of truffles, and in that first hunt, and they were, as they often are with early season truffle, they were unevenly ripe. So and with a little bit of rot. But as you move more into the peak time of the season, which is where we're getting to now, then you're getting full ripeness and the full aroma notes.
The land came first. The idea of creating a truffier emerged next. How did Nigel Wood decide to be a truffle farmer?
Well, it's a long story. I guess when I first got the farm 25 years ago, I was thinking that I was going to grow some grapes. I was pretty keen to grow grapes, but my brother-in-law, who is a very experienced winemaker, said to me, "Look, they're a lot of work, and if you want to make wine, within 10 kilometres of where your farm is, there are 10 different grape producers. So think about doing something else." And I'm a self-taught cook. I'm not by no means a trained chef, but I've always appreciated the aroma profile of truffles and what they can do with with lifting just about any dish. So did some soil tests. We knew already what the temperature range at the farm was, but we basically did some soil tests to see whether we could in fact bring the paddock up to the conditions that were needed, and that soil test confirmed that yes, that would be possible. And so that was basically how I first started, Dani. We planted 400 trees in the first year, and then a couple of years later, about 3 years later, we planted another couple of hundred trees. So we've got 600 trees now.
Few foods evoke the mystery, prestige, romance and narrative of truffles. But what actually is this fascinating underground mushroom, and which conditions encourage it to take hold and form its marvellously odoriferous fruit?
Truffles are basically an underground mushroom. The reason they've got such a powerful scent is because, unlike above ground mushrooms, which can spread their spore when the wind blows the spore along. The truffles had to develop a different way of being able to reproduce, and the way they ultimately have done that is to produce this powerful aroma. Now, in southern Europe, so in the south of Spain, the south of France and central high areas in Spain and northern Italy, there's a bit of an arc through there of where this particular truffle that we're speaking about, the French black truffle or the Périgord truffle, the botanical name is tuber melanosporum. Those grow on quite calcareous soil. So here in Australia, so that means a pH, for people who remember their chemistry, that means a pH of 7.5 or 8. It's an alkaline territory. Because we've got very old soils in Australia, they have a much lower pH, around 5.5. So in order to produce truffles in Australia, unless you are in an area like in the limestone coast where there already is plenty of lime in the soil, then you really need to add a great deal of lime to bring the pH up from 5.5 up to that 7.5 or 8 pH. And so when we planted our farm, or before we actually planted the trees, what we needed to do was to add, just in a small paddock, which is about 1.2 hectares, we added about 140 tonnes of lime, Dani. So it looked like a beach with 2 to 3 inches of, in the old language, of lime spread all over the paddock, and then you rip that in with on the back of a tractor, so that it gets further into the soil profile, and then a season or two later, that's when when the ground will have the right pH to produce the truffle. And the way that the truffles grow is they grow just like other above ground mushrooms. They're above ground mushrooms, and truffles are the fruit of the fungus. And the mycelium, which is the fungal net, if you will, that's people have called it the wood wide web. This mycelium basically, ultimately in time, grows right across the paddock from one tree to the next, and that's when the truffles actually form in summer. So they're just tiny; they're the size of a pinhead. And with some summer rain, we need to irrigate in Australia because we don't get much summer rain, although we got a fair bit this summer. They swell and they grow, and ultimately they fruit in very late autumn and early winter. So right across southern Australia now, from the higher areas in New South Wales around Orange and those sorts of areas, into the snowy mountains, right through around Victoria and Tassie and Western Australia, which is where most of the truffles in Australia come from. About 80% of the truffles grown in Australia come from Western Australia because there are huge farms over there. My farm's got 600 trees. One of the other farms that I buy truffles from, because I don't produce enough myself, has 40,000 trees. So there are huge farms over there. You'd love to be a shareholder in that farm. They're going to produce about 12, 13 tonnes on that single farm this year. I'm probably going to produce 60 kilos. That's what I'm thinking. It looks like now. We've got a really good early season because we had the summer rains. We still had some warmth in summer. Pretty short autumn, but now with the cold snaps that we've had right across the south, then we're really starting to get into the beginnings of the truffle season in Australia.
Trees need truffles, and truffles need trees. What is the exact nature of this intertwined and engaged symbiotic relationship between mushroomy mycelium and thrusting roots? Basically,
the symbiotic relationship is one in which it is a genuine symbiosis where the truffle feeds the tree and the tree feeds the truffle. Now, the way the tree feeds the truffle is that it provides sugars that the truffle can't otherwise get, and the truffle gets moisture that the tree couldn't otherwise get. What happens is that fungal network, the mycelium, forms like a glove around the fine roots of the tree, and there's an intercommunication in that fungal net. And it is a genuine symbiotic relationship. So each is dependent on the other. The host trees that we tend to use in Victoria are mostly oaks of one kind or another. The most popular type of oak is the holly oak, or Quercus ilex is the botanical name. But people also use some hazelnuts here as host trees. Just about any kind of oak will make a good host. So I've mostly got ilex, the evergreen oak, holly oak, but I do have some Quercus robus. So they're the huge, great oaks from ships from great oaks grow. They are huge trees ultimately, but I do have some hazelnuts as well. I must say, if I was planting all over again, I probably wouldn't bother with the hazelnuts. Not because they don't produce truffles really well, but because my paddock has very sandy soil. So I've seen Truffles all around the world, and my Truffle's got the sandiest soil of any that I've ever seen anywhere, from Spain to North America, France, Italy. So if I was growing, it's very quartzy soil. So if I was growing Riesling grapes, the notes that I'd be getting would be a sort of a flinty Riesling. So those of you who are familiar with that grape will understand what I'm talking about. Then what I tend to get as a sort of a back note in my truffle is a bit of that flinty note that you would get if you were growing a grape in that soil.
Hogs or dogs? Nigel reckons there's a very simple answer to the question of which animal is the best partner in truffle hunting.
We have to say, without the dog, there is no truffle. Now, people sometimes say hogs or dogs, and there's a very simple answer to that question, and it's dogs always, because for a pig, and it's sows that in the forest, wild sows in Europe are what predates the truffle. But the problem is that with pigs is that they find a truffle, they're going to eat it. Whereas for the dog, it's a reward game. Training a truffle dog, and any dog can do it. I've had Chihuahuas hunt at my farm. I've got a standard poodle. And also Aussie Shepherds also hunt at my farm, but there are all kinds of dogs that can be trained for truffle, and it's really just a straight scent training, just like bomb detection or customs dogs. And it's a train for reward game, and the dogs won't eat the truffle. They'll just tell you where it is. And so basically what you do is you walk up and down the rows of trees with the dogs. Sometimes they're nearly always off lead, and they will pick up the scent on the breeze, and a well-trained dog will actually mark, go to the spot where the truffle is underneath the tree, and it will mark just put its paw on the top of where the truffle is. Might do a little bit of a dig. So sometimes you might see a truffle that's got a little bit of a scratch in it. That's usually from the dogs. They might have just dug a little bit too deep to identify where that truffle is. But that's basically how you find them. And then the trick is you actually need to determine whether the truffle is ripe and ready to actually dig out of the ground. So you uncover it gently. Because you don't want to knock it. As soon as you disconnect it from the roots of the tree, that's it. You can't put it back in the ground. Once that connection is broken, then you've got to harvest that truffle. And and so a well-trained dog will actually mark truffles that really are just ripe, rather than not ready yet. But sometimes a dog will mark, and I when I sniff it, I'll say to myself, well, no, that needs another week in the ground, so I'll leave it and I'll mark it. I put a marker on the ground, and when I come back the following week to harvest, because I harvest every week, then generally speaking, that truffle that I left is going to be ready the following week. That's basically the technique.
Starting a truffle farm isn't like starting a farm that grows beans or cabbages. It's not as simple as sowing a seed, nurturing the plant, and watching the babies grow. With all that uncertainty and mystery, it was a very special day when Nigel found his first truffle.
So the first truffle I found 4 years after planting, and I remember that was on the 1st of April before 12 noon. And not being a particularly superstitious person, but aware of the stories about the April Fool, I really just took a bit of a fright, really, because I looked in the ground and I thought, that's a truffle, all right. Now, I really was just so amazed. It was a lovely sunny day, and I just picked up that truffle and I fell back on the ground, sun on the forehead, and I just was cries of joy were passing from my lips because all the hard work looked like it was coming to fruition. So I wasn't an April Fool. I've still actually got that truffle. It's a wizened up old thing, but it sits on my desk as a reminder of that very first truffle that I produced. It wasn't ripe, of course, because it was well before the start of winter, but that was the first of my black truffles. I actually grow white truffle as well, which the Italians call the bianchetto truffle. It's got a very, very different note. It's a very cheesy, garlicky, petroleum-like sort of note. And unlike the black truffles, which once they're out of the ground, they're not going to add to their aroma. What you see is when you pull it out of the ground is what you've got. Well, maybe within a day or two there might be a little bit more aroma from them. But with the bianchetto, sometimes 3 or 4 days after it's harvested, it's actually got a more powerful aroma than when it was harvested. So that's quite an unusual feature of that truffle. So different aroma profiles and slightly different management techniques for the two truffles as well, and different cooking techniques as well, of course.
The Australian truffle industry didn't exist last century. It's gone from zero to hero in an extraordinary story of commitment, trial, error, and culture creation. Australia is now the third most prolific truffle growing country in the world.
22 years ago, there were no truffles in Australia, and we have basically gone from nothing to being now the third largest truffle producer in the world, which is a pretty amazing success for such a young industry. So Spain is the largest producer. France is second, although sometimes that flips around depending on the different climatic features from year to year. We're now number 3, having overtaken Italy. So we've basically gone from nothing to the third largest producer in a very, very short space of time. It's a pretty amazing success story, and it's in many ways it parallels the success of the Australian wine industry, where there's where fine Australian wines are now really appreciated on all the tables around the world, all the best tables around the world. So there are probably about 500 growers in Australia. Most of them, are small producers that might have 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 trees, but the large farms, and they are on the east coast for the most part. But they're on the small farms are on the east coast, really, but the big farms that produce huge amounts of truffle are in Western Australia, in that southwest forest area, so around Manjimup, Pemberton. So I go through a lot of truffles each year, Dani. As I said, I think I'll produce perhaps 60 kilos this year, but I go through about 350, 400 kilos. And so I buy my truffles from the largest farm in the country, which has 40,000 trees. That one farm will probably produce 13 tonnes of truffle this year. That is a hell of a lot of truffle now, and nearly all of that is exported because the local demand just isn't there for that volume of truffle. So really, people often think, when they think about truffle, they think, truffle in Australia, they think about Tassie. And that's because the first truffle in Australia was produced in Tassie. But actually, these days, Tasmania as a whole produces less than Victoria. So Tassie's probably going to produce about a half a tonne of truffle this year. I think that both Victoria and New South Wales and the ACT, New South Wales and ACT together, and Victoria will probably produce about 2.5 to 3 tonnes, but far and away the majority of truffle comes out of those big farms in the west.
Do truffles need a festival? Apparently, yes. Nigel used his marketing nous to draw a connection between truffle awareness, truffle passion, and, crucially, truffle sales.
The business Truffle Melbourne, I founded in 2014 with the first Truffle Festival, which was around this time. I always do it at the start of the season because that just piques people's interest. And that was at Caulfield Racecourse in 2014. That really put things on the map, and now we are the largest truffle celebration or festival outside of Europe. So in 2019, in pre-COVID days, we had 40,000 people at through Queen Vic Market in 2019. Because of the whole COVID thing, we weren't able to do a festival in 2020, but last year we were lucky enough to just find a break in the COVID dates. I think we postponed twice, but we were able to stage the festival at Queen Vic Market, which is where we've been for the last several years with the support of the City of Melbourne and Queen Vic Market. So that's one part of my business. It's basically running the Truffle Festival, and that's basically a weekend with chef demonstrations about how to use truffle. Not all chefy ones either. Some simple things to do at home. We have truffle dogs showing how they hunt truffle, and then lots of truffle goodies that are really affordable. So most of the truffle dishes that people will find this year are $20 or less. We've also got a truffle bar. We make truffle cocktails. And that's basically the sort of festival side of things. Because of that association with Queen Vic Market, I also run a pop-up on market days at Queen Vic Market. In fact, I've just finished at Queen Vic Market today, and that runs right through winter. So every market day right through the whole of the Australian truffle season, which basically runs until the end of August. And then the other part of my business is I make truffle products. So I use the truffle from my farm, and I partner up with specialist ingredient people who work with specific ingredients. So, for example, the truffle honey, I've teamed up with Matt and Vanessa from Melbourne Rooftop Honey. They're ethical honey growers, honey producers. And so they make the truffle honey, for example. And that's both a retail and a food service business, the Truffle Melbourne. And also it's an online business as well. So people can order fresh truffle during the season and truffle produce right through the year.
So we've grown the truffle, found the truffle, and got the truffle home. But what do we do next? Nigel shares some of his favourite uses for this black gold.
For me, simple is best. and I think that's the case for anyone working with truffle. I do think that some people who just shave it over the top of a dish are just really wasting their truffle, because you really need to cook with it, I think. So my absolute favourite is actually truffle scrambled eggs. Really simple and easy to do. Another favourite is I make a truffle brie. I don't actually make the brie cheese, but I buy some brie, split it down the middle. So basically I make a brie sandwich, put truffle inside it, and then wrap it up in Glad Wrap. I guess that's a brand name, but in cling wrap, and put it in the fridge for a couple of days, and the truffle infuses right through the brie. It's wonderful. I guess my other big favourite is roast chicken, and again I make that a day. I prepare that a day before I'm actually going to, and sometimes 2 days before I'm actually going to roast. Because what I do there is I slide the thinly sliced truffle under the skin on the breast, and I make a stuffing with truffle added to my usual stuffing mix, and then again cling wrap into the fridge for a couple of days, and the truffle infuses right through the bird. And of course, you can do that with duck or squab or any. Bit hard to get the truffle under the skin with a squab, but there you go. But those are my favourites. Simple is best, and it's the fats that carry the flavour. And so dairy is any dairy product is going to be marvellous. The other thing I really like is winter vegetables soups. So celeriac soup with truffle is to die for. With a little bit of, I like a little bit of parsnip because I'm a big parsnip fan. So celeriac mainly, but a little bit of parsnip and truffle just blitzed through it.
People think truffles are expensive, but is that a question of framing? Nigel explains how truffles can be an affordable, discretionary food product.
So really, the industry has shot itself in the head by talking about $3,000 a kilogram. I always talk about price per gram, and I because really, if you're going to have a couple of friends or four people around for dinner, so 6 of you all together, at 5 to 8 grams per person per dish, you're going to spend about the same as you would on a couple of bottles of wine, good wine that you're going to put on the table. So, look, it's not an everyday thing, but it is. I like to say it's an affordable luxury, and it only comes around for 3 months of the year. So, I at Truffle Melbourne, I sell fresh truffles for $2, whole truffles for $2.50 a gram, and what I call a home chef's grade, which is basically trimmed truffle. It's exactly the same truffle, it's just in small pieces, and that's $2 a gram. So, if you're preparing a soup or a risotto or something like that, or stuffing for a bird, you don't need the fancy-looking truffle. You just can use the less expensive version. So truffles in Australia, generally speaking, are going to be $2.50 to $3. Sometimes some growers will charge $3.50, and I have seen them for $4 a gram. I think that's way too expensive myself. But that's the sort of price range that we're talking around that $2.50 to $3.50 a gram.
Nigel lives and breathes truffles all year round. What does he love most about what he does?
I love truffles because of that aroma profile. The thing that I look forward to every year is opening the fridge door when I've got some truffle in the fridge, because the aroma just wafts out of the fridge, and that's an aroma that I'd kill for. So fresh truffle is something that I just really appreciate, and I guess I like it because I think what I've been able to do is to popularise the truffle in ways that that really showcase the utility and the versatility of the ingredient. It's a flavour enhancer. And when I first was thinking about should I or shouldn't I do a truffle festival, I actually commissioned some research because I've got a bit of a marketing background, and so I commissioned Roy Morgan to do some market research. One of the things that was really particularly interesting about that work was that they found that awareness of truffle was the highest in Perth and in Canberra. And there's a very simple reason for that, and that is that at the time there was a truffle festival being run in Perth and another one in Canberra. The one in Canberra is still going. The one in Perth has fallen over for reasons that I won't bore listeners with, but that was at Mundaring, just out of Perth. There is now a different festival in Western Australia called the Truffle Kerfuffle, and that's actually located in the growing areas in Western Australia, in Manjimup, in the southwest of Western Australia, in about 3.5 hours south of Perth, and that's a weekend festival. And likewise, and I think I'm not sure about the dates for this year, but people can just Google Truffle Kerfuffle, and the Canberra Festival doesn't have a single large gathering, but basically has a lot of little events. So events at a market or events at a truffle farm in Canberra or just out of Canberra in southern New South Wales there. So that was really what convinced me to do the festival, because the awareness of truffle and the correlation between the awareness of truffle and truffle festivals was really what tickled my fancy. And I think with 40,000 people rocking up in 2019, I think I've really put truffles on the map here in Victoria, and in many ways we have visitors from international visitors coming to the festival, people coming out of, which now of course they can again, people coming out of Singapore and New Zealand in particular, and lots of interstate visitors, as well as people from rural Victoria, rural and regional Victoria. And
the Australian truffle industry is an incredible success story. 2 decades ago, it was merely a dream. Now it's the 3rd biggest truffle industry in the world, with chefs across the globe looking forward to truffles from down under. Nigel Wood has been a huge part of the story, growing truffles, sharing expertise, and fostering the excitement that greets the season every time winter rolls around. This is The Producers, a Deep in the Weeds production. I'm Dani Valent. Stay tuned as we talk to some of Australia's best farmers, makers and growers. Follow us on Instagram at Producers Podcast or contact us via deepintheweeds.com.au.